I found aquarium fish and plants in the middle of the Austrian Alps in the wild. I'm standing today in a hot creek. It is really, really warm, 30 degrees Celsius. And what we have here is beautiful Vallisneria plants that are usually only found in home aquariums, platyfish, and much more. And if you want to find out what the most interesting fish was that I found today, then stay tuned. The water here is crystal clear. And there's fish everywhere. But they are obviously native fish.
If you look closely, you can see several beautiful European chub and barbel starting through the water. They're stunning and absolutely typical for these cold alpine streams, but they aren't what we were looking for. There isn't a tropical fish inside. Just yesterday, we were exploring a completely different spot, and we couldn't even find water there, let alone fish. And while these native species are incredibly beautiful, our goal is to find the Warmbach, or Warm Creek in English. But finding this thermal stream is proving to be much harder than we originally thought. The local municipality has set up these massive information boards along the trails, but they haven't published the stream's actual location anywhere online. Without any digital coordinates, we had to get a rough orientation from the physical maps on the trail boards and just start heading downstream, because my wife claimed it's the right direction.
So this shows us that, of course, we went into the wrong direction, as I told my wife, who's probably surprised by now. Maybe turn around the camera. So, of course, we went into the wrong direction because she said we should walk this way, and I said no, we have to walk this way, and this way it says tropical animals, but that's
Usually
no.
I'm always right.
Yeah, she's still right, of course. But anyways, I'm going to check how it looks down there. I don't think that these are tropical fish. They don't look tropical to me. Water is not cold, actually. It's not warm either, but it's definitely not super cold. Guys, I think we are getting closer and closer to the actual warm water. If you look down there, there's a forest of cryptocorynes. I cannot tell the exact species, but looks like a cryptocoryne to me with those curled leaves. This is 100% not a native species of plant. Still, there don't seem to be tropical fish down there, but I guess that's because we are still closer to the cold water and warm water than we were before. So we have to get closer to the source of the warm water creek. Aha. I think we found the tropical fish. Very warm. Haha, the goldfish. Wow. I mean, goldfish are not tropical, they are cold water fish, but they are definitely not native to Germany. So at least we found our first non-native fish species. And I think I can tell that there are some exotic fish hiding down there as well. Now there are several convict cichlids right in front of us. I'll try and get a look at them.
Convict cichlids are a relic of the early hobby. They were first imported to Europe in the 1930s, and the convict cichlid was one of the first fish species that shaped the early aquarium trade. They fascinated aquarists for generations with their raw, wild behavior. They were first discovered in the warm, fast-flowing river systems of Central America, and these fish originally thrive in rocky habitats with strong currents, which explains their robust and muscular build. They are named for their bold, vertical black bars which run down their silver-gray bodies, which mimic classic prison uniforms. They also display interesting color morphs, including darker stripes, but also completely white or even pink specimens. And they are actually quite fierce parents. They are known for their highly advanced reproductive strategy. They form tight, monogamous pairs, laying eggs inside secure rocky caves. Both parents guard the nest with relentless, legendary aggression, willing to take fish several times their size to protect their fry. Right now, we only see them guarding their eggs, but later in the video, we'll see them protecting their fry against fish that are 5 times their size. So stay tuned.
It's hard not to scare them away, actually. These are definitely some Cyphophorus maculatus, southern platyfish, native to Mexico. And according to what I've read, they have formed a stable population of platyfish here for around 40 to 60 years. It's not really clear how long they have been here in a stable population, because aquarists keep releasing fish here, which is something that you shouldn't do. Maybe you can comment below if you think that this is smart or dumb. I think it's not very smart to release fish here because in the end it's non-natural. But what is interesting is that these fish have been described in literature or in newspaper articles as goldfish here. They are not goldfish, but as goldfish because they were released by a aquaculture company here. Oh, my butt is getting wet actually. They were released by an aquaculture company here in last century, and since then they kept reproducing in these Vallisneria forests here basically, and as you can see they seem to be doing quite well here. But there's also tons of native fish who they presumably compete with. Very interesting. Check out an albino cichlid. I think it's also a convict cichlid down there. There's tons of fish anyways. I don't know if you can see it properly on the camera. Perfect. How cool is that? Because these cichlids, they guard their young, and they actually have young. If you zoom in a little bit, they have their baby fish down here. So I don't want to scare them too much by running there or anything. But chances are that they will stay a little bit since they have their young. Now I will try and be silent.
Once the fry hatch and exhaust their yolk sacs, they emerge as a tiny, vibrating cloud of life. The parents act as living shields, guiding the school across the substrate to forage for microscopic foods and biofilm, using rapid fin flickers to signal the babies to instantly drop to the sand and freeze at the first sight of danger. Speaking of danger, there's a lot of dangerous fish in these rivers and creeks. In this strange thermal ecosystem, the fry are surrounded by native giants like the European chub and the common barbel. While these larger fish pose a massive predatory threat, the Convict Cichlids rely on a relentless, hyper-aggressive defense strategy, launching fearless headbutts and biting at the gills and eyes of predators 10 times their own size until the intruders retreat. What makes their strategy truly bulletproof in these currents is their parental coordination. While one parent physically intercepts and distracts the invading Chub or Barbel, the other quickly gathers any stray fry back into the safety of the rocky hardscape, which shows their determination and coordination can conquer even the most hostile environments. Now, after the encounter with these lovely cichlid parents, the first day at the warm creek was over. We went back into our Airbnb and got a good night of sleep, only to return the next morning.
Wow. Now that I know how cool it is at this warm water creek, I'm even more excited than yesterday. So the village that we see over there, it's named Villach. It's in the state of Kärnten in Austria, and it's actually a pretty amazing place to go on vacation.
Looking at the tall pine trees, the thick mountain fog, and waterfalls flowing down the rocky Austrian cliffs, the difference to the thick green plants growing underwater is amazing. It feels like two different worlds meet here, where a freezing cold mountain holds a bright, hidden green underwater jungle.
Now, I placed the camera right in front of this huge Vallisneria forest, and I hope that we can spot some fish. And I'm not speaking very loudly because I don't want to scare them away, because last time I tried it, they were really scared the whole time. Now, I'm going to check out another spot while this camera lays down there. And I actually put it into selfie mode so the fish can see themselves basically. And I feel like this attracts more of the fish than if I just put a camera in there, because they see something that is bright and that is blinking, and that apparently lures them to the camera. If you want to understand how this whole warm water creek even came to existence, let me explain it to you in 2 minutes. So you can see on this diagram here that through precipitation, so rainwater and meltwater, high up in the Alps, there's water draining through some rock layers, and usually the water would end up here and come out in springs with a normal temperature, with a relatively cold temperature. This was like the lake that we saw 2 days ago. But here in the Warmbach in Villach in Austria, it actually drains way deeper and then is used by different spas in the region here to feed their warm water basically. And it's actually quite nice to go into this warm water spas. But it's also the reason why this water here is so warm and so comfy. And it actually, you can see one of these sources here. You can see the flow of water. It's just coming out of the ground. And this is basically rainwater that came here earlier this year or during the winter, or melted, and then was heated underground and then came back up. And this feeds this whole beautiful and super unique ecosystem. And you can actually see the platies and the convict cichlids in their different territories there. So beautiful. Natural wonder. After understanding how this warm water creek came into existence in the first place, we can have a look at our underwater camera footage. Yesterday, we spotted some wild convict cichlids here, but they aren't the only tropical fish in this creek. There are actually 2 species of livebearers swimming in these warm waters, the southern platyfish and the Endler's livebearer. Interestingly, during our whole 2-day trip, we only managed to spot a single Endler's livebearer and absolutely no standard guppy fish.
It seems like the platyfish are far more numerous here, and I have two theories as to why that is. First, maybe their slightly larger size gives them a competitive advantage and makes them the dominant livebearer in the stream. Or perhaps they were released into the creek a few years before the Endlers, giving them a head start to adapt and multiply. To understand how these fish ended up in a place like this, it helps to look at where they originally come from. Endless livebearers are originally native to very specific warm coastal lagoons and streams in Venezuela, while southern platyfish come from the slow-moving, warm rivers and swamps of Mexico, Guatemala and Honduras, so Central America. In their native habitats, both species have evolved a highly efficient reproduction strategy. They are livebearers. Instead of laying eggs that are vulnerable to predators, the males use a modified anal fin called gonopodium to fertilize the female internally. The females then carry the developing embryos inside them, eventually giving birth to fully formed, free-swimming fry that can immediately dart into the weeds safely. This efficient way of breeding is exactly why they became absolute legends in the early days of the aquarium hobby, as even beginners could easily breed them. But out here in this alpine stream, the survival of their fry is a constant battle. Why do you think the platyfish have taken over this warm oasis while the antlers are barely hanging on? Let me know your theories in the comments below.
This really makes you think what would happen if humans stopped maintaining this whole creek. And if you look at my last video where we explored the effect of a power plant and the wastewater of that power plant on the local ecosystem, there it is obvious. Once humans go, all the tropical fish die relatively quickly. Within the first cold days during fall or winter, they just basically freeze to death. Here it is different. If you imagine that humans stopped doing whatever they do here, the warm water would still come out of these springs here, and the fish would probably keep living and reproducing, and maybe would even develop into new species and keep evolving. And if you think about it, global warming makes all of Germany, Austria, the whole world warmer, obviously. Maybe not within the next 5 years or 10 years, but maybe within the next 30 or 40 years, it gets so warm that some of these species can even go from this warm water creek to the cold water creek and then into the Geil River, which is a larger river that flows through the city of Villach, and then two other larger rivers in Europe even. There's also other reasons why they cannot really go there, which is predation. So I haven't seen a perch or a pike or even a catfish in here, which we have seen in this other warm creek in Germany, the Guppy Creek. Check out the video on the top corner. So there are no large predators here. Maybe that's another reason why there's so many tropical fish, because they are also more colorful than our local fish, and therefore have a harder time staying camouflaged. And if we go over there, we can actually see that here we had tons of convict cichlids, tons of platies, tons of other cichlid fish, very colorful fish. And if we go to this area of the river or of the creek where there's no aquatic plants, you can see tons of fish, but most of them look like native fish to me. They're actually quite huge ones. And it's interesting that once there's no Vallisneria, no Cryptocoryne forest anymore, there's tons of large German fish again. And maybe it's because it's easier for them when they are juveniles to stay camouflaged, to stay covered, because they are one with the background. Basically, you can really hardly tell them apart from the underground here, because they almost have the same color, and this obviously is because they have evolved in that way. And this also makes you think, or makes you question, whether these fish would evolve into that direction. Like the convict cichlids, would they ever lose their stripes? Or the platyfish, would they ever turn into this grayish kind of color and sort of adapt to their local environment here and evolve into a more suitable form for this environment here?
Despite the wide open water and my earlier claim that we wouldn't find many highly colorful fish in this creek, the stream had one more incredible surprise waiting for us. Darting through the shadows underwater, I spotted the unmistakable, brilliant red shimmer of the jewel cichlid, Hemichromis bimaculatus. These stunning fish are originally native to the warm, slowly drifting river basins and forest streams of West Africa, which makes their survival in this alpine Austrian environment even more unbelievable. In the aquarium world, they are famous for their vibrant colors, but also for their incredibly bold and territorial behavior. When it comes to reproduction, they are absolute powerhouses. Jewel cichlids form deeply devoted, monogamous pairs and carefully clean off a flat rock or slate to lay their eggs. Once the fry hatch, both parents transform into fierce defenders. Their bodies light up in an intense glowing red spawning color, and they will fearlessly attack anything that gets too close to their nest, regardless of how big that predator is. Seeing these African jewels successfully hunting and nesting in this thermal creek right along Central American livebearers and American cichlids is absolutely mind-blowing. It just shows how incredibly resilient tropical fish can be when they find a stable pocket of warm water. What do you think is the biggest challenge to these West African cichlids in this unique alpine ecosystem? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.
While it is absolutely mesmerizing and beautiful to look at these tropical fish right here in the middle of Austria, it should be noted that you should never release tropical fish from your aquarium because you can't keep them anymore, you don't want to keep them anymore, they become too big for your tank, or you just want to see how they survive in nature because they can become a threat to our local ecosystems here in Austria or in Germany and also in every other country. And most of the time, this is a rather small threat because they are in fact tropical fish. And tropical fish, like there's one actually, tropical fish usually cannot survive throughout the winter because it gets too cold and they just freeze to death. However, in some cases, like for instance the American swarm crayfish, it's a beautiful red crayfish and I actually spotted one yesterday. I didn't really get good footage of it, but they are pretty big crayfish and they are actually hosts of the crayfish plague. And the crayfish plague is a terrible disease that kills our crayfish. It's a mold that infects our crayfish, that also infects North American crayfish, and that kills them, but it doesn't really kill the American ones. So it's really lethal to our native crayfish, and the American ones are just hosts of that plague. Therefore, please keep in mind, never release tropical fish or tropical crayfish, tropical plants to local water bodies. I mean, any tropical animal really, because it's really a potential threat to our local ecosystems. Now look at all the fish here. So cool. Now, one thing that is very interesting to me is here you have the place where the warm water creek and the cold water creek, and I have no better translation because they're literally called Warmbach and Kaltbach, where they meet right next to the highway over there. You can see people are going to work already. And it is here where you can see that the Vallisneria plants are growing exactly until this point where both creeks meet. And here you have this less bushy patch of Vallisneria plants. Now I would assume they slowly grow into that cold water creek, which gets probably also a bit warmer during the summer. And then during winter, they probably die off on this place. That's why they are very small Vallisneria plants compared to the ones that we have further upstream. Then we come here at this zone where both creeks meet, and there's no plant life at all, but there's these rather large fish. They're actual giants compared to the tropical fish that we saw. And then when we move further here, where both creeks meet basically or have met, we again have a warmer patch, obviously, because the two streams meet here. And there you can see again the Vallisneria plants. And also there's some cryptocorynes, and maybe we can see them when we move a little further downstream. There's also some smaller cryptocoryne plants right here. Don't know which exact species, but it's definitely some kind of cryptocoryne. You even get a leaf so you guys can see with your own eyes. Cryptocoryne. Maybe if one of you knows, you can comment below which kind of cryptocoryne it is. But how freaking cool is that in the middle of the Austrian Alps? Cool. If you found this video interesting, I would highly appreciate it if you could share it with a friend who would probably also find this interesting. And I would also like to take this time to point out a big thanks to my members of the Guppy Gang and the Tetra Gang. You guys get early access to my newest videos, get channel member only posts, and many other benefits. And all that for a small monthly price of $1. And if you are interested in also joining the Guppy Gang or the Tetra Gang, you can scan this link or just check out the link in the description. And if you found this video interesting, I'm sure you would enjoy watching this video about the cherry shrimp creek in Germany, where cherry shrimp live in the warm wastewater of a power plant, or this video. Thanks for watching.